Welcome to our special episode of Nature-Based Therapy, a family's journey into healing. I'm Tiffany Silva Herlin, a licensed clinical social worker who supports families navigating the complex path of treatment and healing. Today, you'll hear the real story of a family who chose to continue their child's healing in a nature-based residential program. We'll explore how they made this decision, what their child experienced, and what life looks like now. Please remember that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy. Please always seek a mental health professional for your situation. All right, Rivka, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
All the way from Florida.
All the way from Florida.
Yeah, a little cooler out here today.
It's kind of nice. It's really beautiful. And waking up to these mountains is out of control.
Yeah, it's so beautiful this time of year. So you came at the best time.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into your story and talk about what was it like being at ThreePeaks Ascent and why you chose it. And for our families listening who may be on this path of outpatient therapy is no longer working, being at home isn't an option, they need safety and stabilization for their child. How do they know where to go next?
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about having an ed consultant. I think navigating the programs, which one is right for your child, when is it time to remove the child from the house, when does the family need that kind of level of intervention? So I encourage any family contemplating this to get an ed consultant. Their role is to really understand your family, your needs, how your family needs to heal. So every move we made was with the involvement and support of our ed consultant. And of course, everyone involved in the treatment of this child. So
can I pause real quick? For our listeners, an educational consultant, like you said, is someone that you hire that helps you not only be an advocate for this journey, but that their whole role and profession is to understand these programs and know what they specialize in and the people who, you know, the therapists and who they work with, so that when a family like you comes to them and you say, here's my son, here's his issues, they can come to you and say, here's some programs to look at.
They also will pre-screen the child's eligibility. So they might present the child to many programs who will pass on the opportunity to work with our precious child. So it's nice for the family. One, their job is like a matchmaker. Two, they're pre-screening. So by the time options are presented to us, they had already preliminarily said, yes, we're interested. So they had seen his chart, they had seen his history, and they were prepared to meet with us, to get to know us, to move forward. So every move we made was with the assistance of our ed consultant. We got to ThreePeaks a little bit non-traditionally, in that our child had spent time inpatient and in residential treatment before going to the nature-based program. So he had learned a tremendous amount, probably could write the books, but had not yet made the shift, had not yet actually fostered and decided on becoming the change. And so he needed that level of change. So he actually went from residential treatment to ThreePeaks Ascent, and the change was remarkable.
And to our listeners, while that may not be where their child is at, but if you are a listener who has a child in residential and they're just not making the progress you want to see, sometimes this reset, this reboot, choosing a nature-based program can really be the turning point.
And I think what is unique about nature-based is applicable at any stage for the child to have a master reboot. So the disconnect from electronics, just that alone is enormous. There was no light pollution. Yeah. There was actual darkness, and how we just talked about it on our way over here, how essential darkness is to just our life cycle and our daily cycle and our rhythm, which I had never heard him speak of that seriously about this, and how much he values darkness. So he does sleep in pitch black, and we always knew that he liked that, but there's also no noise pollution. The only noise that he heard were the sounds of nature. So at night, the only thing they got were the few animals that may be moving around, but other than that, it was silent. He speaks of being able to hear some things from an army base 2 states over. So how clear the environment was of all things urban. So I think just in terms of that, we can't discount the child disconnecting from so many disruptions and distractions of our daily lives. I think every nature-based program probably has its own nuances. At Three Peaks, the children are preparing their own food. They get different ingredients every food drop. So they need to really adapt to whatever they have. They have to eat 3 meals a day. They have to meet certain requirements of how much they eat or whatever. And so there's an independence that the child gains whether they want to or not, because they have to eat. There's only so much you can do with raw lentils. And so him really developing that sense of independence was remarkable. And to this day, I mean, he's just self-sufficient, blows up the kitchen regularly, but he not having food readily available doesn't jar him at all. Like most kids are like, oh, what's for breakfast? He just goes and makes breakfast. So it's kind of nice. They also learn to live with very little. All the children have the same. So the same few pieces of clothing, the same shoes, the same boots. And there's a simplicity that they're forced to just accept, which is really beautiful. One of the other things that happens is because all the children are working with a few pieces of clothing and they're all the same, is there's just a lower maintenance required with him in general. He doesn't need the brand names. He doesn't even need the comfort that he used to want. He used to be very sensory, and he didn't like this jeans and that type of cloth, and he's
more
just
picky.
So simple in that regard, which is really, really beautiful. We have 3 others who are not that simple. So I think that there's a really elemental connection to themselves that happens in that space because all the other distractions are really eliminated. And what they're left with is the relationship with themselves and the relationship with their peers. And there's a lot of supervision. I think what's so impressive is these adults who are willing to live under those conditions.
It does take a special person to work out in the field.
That is unreal. I mean, they go out there a week at a time, and they're just as committed. They also have to cook their food, and they also have to wear the few clothing that they have out there. And it's really incredible to experience this little community of people who are disconnected from our daily humdrum and wholly focused on themselves and their connections, right, to self and others. I think it's that space that allowed for our son to finally make that leap and finally say, I'm just done this waffling. I just need to do it. It's time. And the transition for him was relatively quick in that he had already learned it over the last few years, and was able to adopt it. So I think when I consider what would it have been like had we done the nature-based on the front end, I think it probably would have almost been like a palate cleanse of getting rid of so much of the static of our daily lives and allowing for just more space to connect with himself, to evaluate himself and the connections or lack thereof in his life. And most importantly, find himself. I think the most critical was him connecting with self and being able to discern and then make decisions based on what he liked and didn't like about himself and who he wants to be. And I'm not sure that there's ever a bad time for that, but I imagine that starting the healing journey with that space is probably magical.
And as a therapist who's seen kids come in to a residential treatment program from a place like ThreePeaks Ascent or a nature-based program, it definitely is that. It kind of jumpstarts them. It helps them be able to, like you said, take a look at themselves, get rid of all the distractions, get grounded and centered easier and faster. So it kind of, it jumpstarts the therapy process. Those kids who come in are usually more ready to engage in the process and have less fight. So nature-based therapy, like you said, is just so good, especially for kids who are really defiant.
Yeah. Kids
who are just really fighting, because you take away the power struggle of all the distractions and what I like to call white rabbits for parents to chase. And it's just them against nature, and the staff are there to support and the therapist. But like, you can't really fight with nature.
It's also, you're fighting yourself.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't cook your meal, you're hungry.
Yeah.
If you don't bathe, well,
you're dirty.
You just have your own stench. Like,
there's the natural consequences that are at play
in the most basic ways.
Yeah. And obviously the program is set up to keep kids always safe, always safe. They're not going to let them go hungry and, be all ever in danger. But there is a part of letting the natural consequences play out to a point to help the kids learn that.
So let's address that in case someone's worried about their child going hungry. So, I can only speak for ThreePeaks Ascent and how this ran in this program. If the child does not prepare their own meal, they will be provided one, and then they get what they call like a med consequence. So they'll lose other privileges.
Okay.
So your child's not going to go without food.
Yeah.
They will lose other privileges. So for example, my child at some point, not related to food, but he was destroying property in the bathhouse. And so he lost privileges for several days until he can earn that back. So the consequences are as basic and elemental as they can get, right? Because we're talking about a toilet and a shower at that point.
Yeah.
And so there's a real concrete understanding that the children gain without much thought. I think we spend so much time with words, and I would say that the nature-based program has just less words and more actions, more experiences, and more acceptance than in the space of noise. Even residential treatment, they go to school, right? There's academics, there's a laptop in most residential treatment. For schooling only, but there are other things getting in your way, even laundry. I was going to say, like, at residential treatment, the kids have to do their own laundry.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
In nature-based programs, they bag it and it's taken back to base and then brought back. So they're not even doing laundry. They are just surviving.
Which is such therapy in itself.
Incredible.
As a therapist, yeah. Well, and one thing that I noticed at a residential treatment program working at one is the first couple of phone calls you get between the child and their parents is, hey, mom and dad, can you send me this? Hey, mom and dad, I missed this. Hey, how is so-and-so doing? How is, my friend doing? Do they, they still are still connected to all that stuff. Hey, I want you to send me this candy. I no longer have it. I need it. It's like, you don't really need that candy. Hey, I don't get this soda. You have to send me a pack of soda. You right? Or I really need these new shoes that are coming out. It's like, and there's a lot of times I have to step in as a therapist and be like, no, like you actually, your parents are at an ATM machine. Let's start with working our relationship with our parents again. Right? So that's all taken away when you're at a nature-based program like ThreePeaks Ascent.
Yeah. I think also the phone calls, like you just mentioned, are really different. There was a lot more hearing about the spindles and the type of wood, and I found this kind of tree and this kind of bush and things that I could never retain, but found fascinating that this is what was being shared rather than asks and rather than kind of the oxygen sucking the life out of the room, being sucked out of the room. It was more just sharing experiences, and there were so many new ones. I built this kind of fire, and I discovered that if it's this wood against that wood, then it's actually different because of whatever. And so there was just information exchange that was simpler. I think the simplicity of the nature-based program is probably the most different than any other program our children have options of going to.
Yeah.
I think also it's noteworthy that ThreePeaks Ascent kept the group pretty small. So there are a lot of adults and not a lot of children. So
I think high supervision.
Right. It's high supervision and also high accessibility to kind of the stability of an adult. So you're always going to have chemistry, and children will get along with some adults better than others or connect differently. So the variety of the adults staying with them, and also lots of people coming from camp, from base. So there's their therapist, there's a nurse, there's the nurse practitioner that they sort of met with periodically for meds. The program director, who I've gotten to know, and I didn't even know that the children interacted with him. He had gone out to the program. So realizing that the children really knew, even the admin staff, and that's an hour and some change out of their enterprise base. Like, they're driving out to nowhere to see the children. So hearing that the children know Darcy, that they know Steve, it was remarkable to hear of the efforts made by the treatment team to really go out to the children where they were, rather than the children ever having to really come out of that cocoon that they were getting to live in. It's a bubble that's so beautifully void of our noise.
Well, let's talk about, why would a family choose a nature-based program, and how do they know they need that next step, right? So yes, that's a scary step as a parent that you've had to make yourself.
So I think probably the first question is, when do you contemplate something out of the home?
Yeah.
And I think it's when you have exhausted everything you can. My mom once said, when you can't take one more day. I think when in a family system, safety needs to stay front and center. So even if you, as one of the parents, feels that, well, I could do another day, that evaluation needs to be done also on the other family members. So especially when there are other children in the home, when is the system unsafe? And at that point, I think a parent knows that it's time. When you feel like you can't keep the home emotionally or physically safe for every single person in the family, it's time.
And I, like you say, not only physically, but emotionally too.
100%.
Because it's traumatic, and often the family's in crisis. When you're at that point where you're like, we are just surviving. And you said, can't take one more day.
Right. And so I think as soon as one person in the family can't take one more day, that's the day it was supposed to happen. And then getting a consultant, getting the right support system. So I leaned really hard on our existing providers at home. So his therapist, his psychiatrist, the ed consultant, they all became part of the team, even though, right, our current therapists and psychiatrists were really on their exit now. They were going to hand off to someone in a much more acute environment, but they were phenomenal. So I would say to families, don't cut them off just yet. Yeah. Utilize them to help transition. They will also be hugely involved in kind of giving report to the next provider, so that all things can be considered. What has your child worked on? What has your child bucked the system with? Things like that you're flooded. You're in crisis mode. You might not know all the things to tell the therapist or the new program. So the more people that you have who are experienced with your child involved in that transition, I think the better off everybody will be. I do implore families to tell the truth. It's an embarrassing
100%.
Shame. There's shame, there's embarrassment, there's sort of this mourning process. And I would say, set it aside. You'll have a minute to breathe. Once your child is placed, do everybody a solid favor and tell the truth, right? If your child is aggressive, tell them how aggressive. If your child is depressed and not eating, tell them how long it's been. Tell them what it takes to get something in their mouth, because you're not helping anybody by telling fiction.
Well, you're just prolonging the inevitable. I mean, it's going to come out eventually, and you're actually making treatment longer for yourself.
Well, you also might be sending your child to the wrong place.
Absolutely.
Right? So laying out all the facts, super important.
And it's no longer safe for your child and that program if they don't have all the facts.
Exactly. So once I think that there's a moment when a parent knows. For me, I'll never forget the moment. It was as critical a moment as probably ever was in our home. So it was a very obvious moment for me. Like, I've maxed out. I've done everything I could. None of us are safe. And it might not be so obvious for another family. In hindsight, I do wish that there are other moments that had been there. And I sort of got in my own way of being so determined to create an environment where my child could heal. We're separating him. I almost basically created like a day hospital in my home. And that didn't work for anyone. It wasn't healthy for our family. It wasn't healthy for him. Certainly wasn't healthy for me. So in hindsight, there were other moments that I wish I had seen. Once I made the decision, it took about 7 days to get to the right program. So at that point, your ed consultant is presenting your child, and there are going to be programs who are going to say no, especially when there's aggression. And I think it's important for people to know that different programs have different focuses. A program that's focused on sexual trauma is not the right place for a child with severe drug abuse, or right. There's just, you need to end up in the right program. And so it will take a moment. And during that moment, safety has to be priority. So everything else sort of goes on hold. Some of the kids went to school, some of them didn't. I'm not even sure I could tell you who was where. Everything was just about maintaining safety. My brother actually came to help because my brother's a huge guy. And so he came to help. And just having the right manpower in place to get through the days that it took to get him to safety. And then trust the decision you make. So once you've made a decision, the program has accepted your child, you've accepted them, you've connected with them. There's usually like an interview of sorts. Depending on your child's state of mind, mine was not available for any interviewing or anything like that. But some children will engage in that program, in that process.
Some will even come and tour the programs and willingly.
Yeah.
And there are some that absolutely, if they knew they were going, will, try to run or do other things to get out of it.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Once you make that choice, go all in.
Yeah.
I think moms probably more than dads, but we probably all have some level of familiarity with buyer's remorse and self-doubt and did I make the right decision? You've made it and you're moving forward. So trust the system, trust the program, trust the people, and set aside, like, you're going to have time to process your own stuff, I promise. So I encourage families to stay focused on getting to safety, getting your child to the program. We certain transitions we did ourselves, and some we used transport services. They were amazing. He speaks super highly of them. The only thing they took away were his shoes so that he can't run. And he was fed every few hours. He was offered bathroom breaks every time they passed a service station. He said he was treated with nothing but respect.
So he wasn't traumatized by a transportation service.
Not even a little bit. They allowed him to pick the genre of music. Like, there was a lot of involvement and interaction. Mm-hmm. No, that was not a source of trauma at all. So I think what we feel after our child is picked up is incredibly painful And I think we run into this like dark place of panic of, oh my God, is my child feeling the darkness I'm feeling? And my child reports, no, actually, the people, so in his case, it was 2 men. They were funny. They came prepared. So my child is sports obsessed. So they were prepared to talk about that. They shared all kinds of funny current events. And he said they talked for the full, I think they drove for like 7 hours, and they talked the whole time.
Yeah.
And he was thrilled because they basically, every time they ate, they got like fast food, and it was just lovely for him.
Sounds like it was more of a fun experience.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So by the time he got to ThreePeaks Ascent, he wasn't a ball of knots. And he had really accepted that that's where he was going.
My experience is they're often really trained and well in helping talk the kids through that and process it. They're not therapists usually, but they have an ability to help the kids process their emotion and be like, hey, this is your last chance. Like, you really need to take advantage of this.
Yeah. And they often have very colorful backgrounds in that some of them come from military, some come from law enforcement. There are things that the kids find interesting and intriguing. And I've heard that across the board. Like, I've interacted with a lot of the kids who have been transported, and that is not a source of trauma. That is actually a place where they felt sort of contained in a safe space where the people they were able to talk to knew a lot about what was going on. So I think from a parent standpoint, once you sort of hand your child off, so you send them with nothing. I mean, they go with the clothes they wear, and they're going to check them in. So they're given, all the kids get the same clothes, the same boots, the same shoes, the same clogs. So your child's clothes from home will get boxed and kept at base. And your kid will go out to, I guess, base camp with the same stuff as everybody else. So there's an immediate level setting of, this is what I got. Everybody has the same, so there's no point in complaining because it's not like anybody has something better.
Doesn't matter where you came from or how much money you have or your background or your history.
Now, as they work through the levels, it is interesting. Like, they are able to earn like a chair, like one of those like stadium seats that they could put on the logs and things like that. So there are some privileges that they can earn further down. But generally, the simplicity of the reality, I think, allows for that immediate letdown of just come down from whatever. And some of the kids take a while. There are kids who buck the system. My child sort of loved it. So he came in pretty enthusiastically. Worry not, there were plenty of moments later where he showed them exactly what he was made of. But I know that some of the kids do come in kind of fierce and trying to get kicked out. And I think what's important for parents to know is your kids didn't lose their sense of manipulation just because you transported them to ThreePeaks Ascent. So remember that these are master manipulators.
Your son would even say that. We did a podcast with him, and he said, we are good at what we do. Like, just remember that was our goal and why we got here.
So they're going to tell you exactly what they need to tell you. So they might tell you, I don't have food. You're right. They have raw food and they need to cook for themselves. They might tell you, I don't have water. Yeah, they have to go to the well and they pump the well and they fill the bladder bag with water. And they're hiking and they're experiencing these phenomenal spaces, and they're learning how to make fire, and they're learning how to do just really basic things. And they have to clean their own pot. So if you burnt your food, you need to wrestle with what's at the bottom of that pot. You clean it, because otherwise, how are you cooking tomorrow morning? So it's real life skills that your child's going to play up and make it sound like all hell has broken loose. But remember, they're in a really safe, clean space. It's probably the purest space your child is ever going to experience. And it's where your child is hopefully going to find their own voice and their own self. So I encourage parents, even if you're going to have a strong response to whatever you're hearing from your kids, don't do it with your kid. You have questions, call the program. I was not an absentee parent. I was in touch with everybody all the time, probably to the point of nuisance. But I didn't cloud or crowd my child's experience. So I didn't do that to him, with him, in front of him. I did that with everybody else. So I wanted to know what did his blood work come back. He had diabetes. So I wanted to know, like, what's happening. I wanted all the breakdown. I wanted copies of the labs. I wanted all the detail, but not with or in front of my child. So ask all your questions, be connected to the team. The more you interact with the team, the more confidence you'll have. And it's okay to miss your child, and it's okay to desperately want to be with them. And it's a long time. Time is a funny thing in this journey because it's not defined. The sooner your children figure out that it's defined by their participation and their willingness to change, the sooner time starts moving at a faster pace. At the beginning, it's painfully slow, and the unknown can be frightening for everybody. So your child is fighting, perhaps, the system and trying to figure out, how do I get kicked out of this and get home? And you're trying to figure out, how long is this going to happen for? What am I in? What did I just sign up for?
Yeah.
So,
and also, how do I hold all these new boundaries that I'm maybe not used to holding?
Well, yeah. And that's a huge transition. And I would say to every parent on this journey, welcome, because you are here for life.
So you're in the right place.
Yeah. So this is a safe space. It's going to be hard work for everyone. Your child is about to do the hardest work they've ever done, and so are you. For the family system to heal and for the process and program to work, everybody needs to be in. So I would say that the parents are the leaders of this organization, and as much as we don't want to own that certain patterns, certain dysfunctions started with us or because of us, and we as the leaders need to be courageous and change them. And so the process is not just your child. I like the analogy of a puzzle piece.
Oh, yes.
And your child is a certain shape, puzzle piece, and you send him to another program. And if the whole puzzle stays exactly the same, but the puzzle piece changes shape, when he comes home, he's gonna have no choice but to go back to his old shape to fit into the system. And I think that's exactly right. The whole system needs to evolve while your child is learning, because we've all contributed to whatever is or isn't in some way. And we need to heal ourselves and probably learn a thing or two, and owning the boundaries and then holding them, supporting our other children through a process that perhaps has some trauma and pain and maybe no hope. Maybe those children are lacking hope. So there's a lot that happens from the parent standpoint of having to be involved in a process that's across the country or somewhere, not in your home. For us, it was across the country. There's this enormous system that's still struggling at home. And so plugging in, the sooner that the parents accept that this is our journey too, I think the sooner you see the magic of the pieces starting to work together. So, I mentioned a few minutes ago, your child needs to figure that out, right? That time is going to move only as quickly as they are going to allow it to. The second piece of that is us. And this is not a car mechanic where we drop the car off and then just pick it up and drive off.
Hope they did it right.
Yeah, this is not that. This is a process and a program that involves all the parties.
Yeah.
And your child is learning skills and boundaries, and so are you.
Well, what does that process look like for the parents? How are they involved? What was it like for your family?
So for ThreePeaks Ascent, because it's a shorter program, you're going to have your weekly therapy calls, and like I said before, reach out if you have questions, if there are things you need more explanation for, if you need more time with the administration, ask for it. But it's going to be a distance experience, right? So there's that weekly Zoom call, but it's not in person. In other programs where you're more long-term, so residential programs that are designed to be longer, you will have opportunities to go visit, opportunities to be on campus, on site, to actually experience parent weekends or seminars. So each program has their own design. But for the nature-based piece at ThreePeaks Ascent, you're doing this through distance. So one of the things that I highlight to everyone is you get 1 hour with your kid a week. So take that seriously and bring the version of yourself that you want to bring to that meeting. So set the time aside. Don't be in the car. Don't be distracted. Make it work around your schedule. Maybe it's your lunch hour and you can close yourself in the supply closet. Whatever works for you, make it work into your schedule so that you could bring your best self and really engage in that family session. You want your child to do that. So you need to also, right, set the example. And you also, frankly, need to do that to be able to retain and internalize what's being taught. They'll tell you to read books. They're going to suggest, but really, they're not so much suggestions. They're really necessary. So the books that they're asking you to read are directly connected to the process. It's written with experience. I think the book that I probably had to read at every single program we went to was The Parallel Process, and it's just so good and so plain English. And to this day, sometimes I need to go back and read certain parts because I find that I hate the word triggered, but there will be an experience that reminds me of something in the past. I'm like, woo. Like, we don't want to go there.
That's normal. That's a normal part of parenting, especially when things get really difficult raising kids, which it will for every parent.
Oh, yeah. This is not an easy process.
No.
It will take as long as your family needs it to take. But the sooner everyone plugs in, the sooner you can get there. The sooner you can start experiencing success. And success does breed more success.
Absolutely.
Most children will not just go to one program and then go home. So most children will then transition to something else. And even there, residential treatment is so dependent on the pace of the child and the family. So you can have a child rocking it, but if the parents are completely aloof and disconnected, who or where are they going home to?
Yeah.
And so there's not going to be that vessel for the child to return to if we're not all engaged.
I love that. I love your advocacy to make sure that the parents show up 100% and expect their kid to be 100%, right? Like the whole family has to be engaged. The parents both have to be engaged. The step parents, whoever is involved, all need to show up and remember that it's a system. It's not just go fix my kid and send him home. And it's so important. I love also you pointing out that like you get a phone call once a week with your child out in nature-based therapy, because I think there are some programs that don't allow that, but at ThreePeaks Ascent you have contact.
Yeah.
So
it's on Zoom. Like you get to see your kid, which is nice.
Which is nice to know and see, like, are they safe? Are they well? How are they doing? So all that kind of fear or worries you may have as a parent can be, settled a bit.
Yeah. It's also amazing to see how much filth comes through even on Zoom. It's really remarkable. I mean, the kids live in nature.
Dirt. Well, for anyone who hasn't been to Southern Utah, it is one of the most gorgeous places I've personally ever. I didn't grow up camping and being an outdoorsy person, but going out, I love Southern Utah, and going out there makes me want to become more. So they live in an absolutely gorgeous place, but there is a ton of dirt.
They're surrounded by these mountains that they will challenge themselves to peak. And so there's built-in goals, even in the nature in which they live, in the camp that they set up. So it's pretty cool to hear, for me it was, to hear my child kind of check things off.
Yeah.
And then the number of fires that he was starting. He was a master fire starter. So that was also very cool.
Did he struggle with being in nature at first, or it sounds like he embraced it right away?
So he loved it.
Okay.
He embraced all of it.
Which isn't always the case, right?
Correct. So I do think that you're going to have the child that's like, oh my God, this is amazing. I never have to shower again. And then you're going to have the child who's like, but what do you mean? Where are my bougie soaps? And, you know, like they are terrified by what is or isn't.
I don't have any service out here. I don't have my cell phone.
Right. I
can't live without it.
And look, I mean, even the Wi-Fi connectivity is not always amazing. So there were times where our Zoom calls were sort of splotchy. So you take what you can get. And, you know, if it's raining and it's overcast, then it shows on the quality of your video call. So you definitely get to at least vicariously experience this very nature-based reality. And I would say, again, if your child is freaking out from it, just remember, they are safe. They do have what they need. They might be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is going to lead to a space where they can connect with themselves. And that's why you sent them.
Well, growth doesn't happen in comfort. They need to be uncomfortable. There needs to be a disruption in the pattern. There needs to be some discomfort for them to be able to really grow, reconnect with themselves, and start the healing process. Was it hard being so far away from them? Because I think some parents, when they're at this crossroad of, okay, home's not working, and I know I need to send them away, but I want them somewhere close in state. You know, sending them across the country or even a few states away is scary.
Yeah.
So what helped you make that decision?
So I think triaging and setting priorities is imperative in this whole process. There are going to be a lot of things that are not comfortable here. The distance feels enormous. For me, it was a 4-hour flight, 5-hour flight. It was just extraordinary. But we prioritize safety so far up, number one, that anything number two was so far behind that it didn't matter. And if we were going to do this, we wanted to do it in the right program. So if you're going to engage all these people and you're going to put forth probably a tremendous amount of money and time and effort and energy and a lot of people's involvement, I personally would not prioritize distance. I think proximity becomes irrelevant. You're not going to see your child every week. You're not even going to see them once a month, perhaps. So does it really matter if you're going to fly 1 hour or 4 hours at whatever interval you're going to do it? Or is it more important that your child be at the right program for them? So I touched on it earlier. Each program has a focus, and it's not a negotiable focus, right? If the child has sexual trauma, they need to be at a program that's designed for that. If a child has drug abuse, they need to be there. If the child is aggressive, they need to be in a program that can tolerate and support aggression. So there's a lot of things that are dictated by your child and your family. So to prioritize another factor of proximity, I think, is a mistake. Your child could end up in the wrong place, which could not only not yield the results you're hoping for, could potentially be more traumatic and damaging. So for me, that was perhaps easier to accept. I just kind of accepted it, that if he was a plane ride away, it didn't matter how long the plane ride was. If you can get there, the sooner you can get there where the right program is the priority, the sooner you will also feel more settled in where you send your child. Because if you prioritize something like proximity and end up sending your kid to the wrong program, how are you ever going to really engage? How are you ever going to quell the jumping bean that keeps screaming, like, why is he there? So I think setting your priorities with safety being the number one non-negotiable item, will eliminate a lot of the noise and distractions. And remember, it's not just your child's safety. It's also the safety of every family member. So, the show, You Are the Weakest Link. Mm-hmm. The family system is only as safe as the least safe person. So when you consider that safety is a multifaceted concept, and it's physical and it's emotional and it's mental, and survival is not enough. Survival is not safe. We can't live in that place for very long, or we start breaking down our brain. So if anybody's in survival mode, we are not safe yet. So the sooner that we process that, the sooner that we break that down, I think the sooner we can get to our actual priorities for our family, and then just keep going back to that list. Write it down if you need to, so that when you start feeling queasy about, I can't believe he's 2 time zones away. Yeah, it's terrible. 2 time zones is a long way away. But go back to your safety. Go back to your list. Safety is number one. He needs to be where he's safe. He needs to be where he can thrive. He needs to be where everybody can be safe. So in hindsight, it's easier said than done. But write it down. Put it on your fridge. Put it on your T-shirt. Whatever you have to do.
Agreed. And while time it's not that it's irrelevant. It's not really a focus, right? But at the same time, let me rephrase that. While time shouldn't necessarily be the primary focus, when you aren't focused on the safety and what your child really needs, you're making this a longer process than it needs to be. You're drawing it out, which is going to be hard on your child, on you, on your family, emotionally, financially as well. So trust the process and know that, yes, it may not be in state. And one thing I really want our listeners to understand about a place like ThreePeaks Ascent is that it's a great place to start. Well, that was not how your family ended up there, but most families are going to start there. When your child is no longer really getting much out of talk therapy, they need that experience. They need that grounding. They need to get away from those distractions, and even especially if they really struggle with power struggles. Or they're really defiant. This is a place that's going to help them engage quicker into wherever they go next, and to start their healing process more efficiently. Rivka, tell us, what was therapy like at ThreePeaks Ascent?
There were therapy days, and then there were, I forget what they called them. There were like therapeutic skills that they had to work on. And then also, I forget what they called them, but it was more of their life skills. So they had to work on fires and different skills in the wilderness and in just in nature. So they had therapy all the time. For us, it was an hour, it was appropriately timed with the intensity or the work we were doing at the moment. And often there were assignments that we had to do between sessions as much as he was. So he was doing work daily. He had his notebook, he had his assignments, he had to do a whole lot more work, more regularly, I would say. We definitely had to do work between sessions. There were writing assignments, there were reading assignments. And I would say that it became like a 3-year introspection for our whole family. It is so system-wide. If you really want to get everything you can get out of this, you want to dive all in. You want to make this a systemic process so that I'm a better mom, I'm a better wife, I'm a better professional. I'm better to myself as a result of the process. I know my child in ways that probably most parents don't. Our whole family communicates in ways that I don't know we would have ever achieved had it not been for the last few years of this very complicated journey of unpacking ourselves and our system, right, as a whole, and learning how to be vulnerable and then connect on levels that can't happen without vulnerability. So I would say that it's an all-inclusive experience.
Yeah.
And I would say you can't force your other children to do it. The children each had to get there in their own time, in their own process, and they each did their own work. But I do think that it's imperative. The parents have to dive in. You have to be there with your child. You have to be there with yourself and each other for you to really evolve into what you can be, which is a family that is connected, that has fulfilling relationships, where everybody is thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you talk about the need for everyone to be involved, especially the parents. And ThreePeaks Ascent is a program that requires involvement of the parents and their child, and is not just focused on the child. Even though there's distance, there's maybe Wi-Fi issues, they are still requiring that you show up, just like you said before.
You're also writing to your child. So
absolutely.
Some programs require that you actually use snail mail, like you're actually dropping letters into the mailbox. At ThreePeaks Ascent, you are emailing your letters. So I would handwrite them, because I do think that there's an intimacy about getting a handwritten letter. And then I would scan it and email it to the therapist. And then it will get out there either the next time the therapist goes out or with the next food drop. So it's very cool for the child to get handwritten things from you. Sometimes if my nieces and nephews would like draw pictures, then that went with my letter. And so, they're printing all kinds of stuff for the kids. And that's forming connection that it's not a text, right? It's not instant gratification. I write it today. My child might not get it for 2 days, and then he might not respond to it for another 2 days. So one of the things that I learned to do with my kid was I found that he was very happy getting letters, but not loving writing them. And I said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start writing a question in every letter. And until I get an answer to that question, I'm not writing another one. Trust and believe the letters started flowing. So even that of learning how to be equally invested in a give and take experience was so powerful for both of us.
Absolutely. Let's touch on a little bit of what some of the parent satisfaction stats that we've collected from our own data on this program for our listeners, because I think it really touches on what you've just talked about over the last little bit of our conversation. 95% of adolescents themselves reported being satisfied with the quality of treatment they received at the program. Then 97% of adolescents reported much improvement as a result of completing treatment. So now let's shift to the parents. 93% of the parents reported being satisfied with the quality of treatment they received, and 91% of parents reported improvement in their child's problems when compared to when they entered. So all the things that you're reporting, they're feeling safe. If they're engaging and completing the program and the parents are involved, you're going to see progress. So now let's shift to now that he's completed it. What is life like now that he's been home?
Amazing, surreal. It's not perfect. Coming home still involves regular therapy, structure all day long. Structure. For us, it's being able to enjoy our entire family system at a level that we probably never even aimed for. Our life was so chaotic before. I'm not sure that I ever even had a vision of what it would look like with 4 adult children in the same home with us. Like I just couldn't have even envisioned it. We did all come together for his high school graduation, and it was magical. It was days of togetherness on different levels, different components, different experiences, and all of them connected. There was so much connection. It was almost palpable in the home. And just for that, it was worth every minute and every dollar. But to watch our children connect with each other and themselves, to watch them thrive, to watch them each navigate young adulthood and, the big life decisions that it appear to be all encompassing, with confidence and with self-pride is worth everything. And it's not lost on me or my husband that it took courage from us to dive all the way in, to be vulnerable, to be so honest with our children, to be willing to evolve ourselves and to come to this place of connection through vulnerability. The transparency in our home is worth everything.
Yeah. Well, true connection comes from vulnerability. And it had been a number of years since you'd had all your kids together in the same house, correct?
Since before COVID.
Oh my goodness.
So
what a special moment to have not only your son graduate, have all your kids in the same house. Probably something you hadn't even really envisioned for yourself when you started this journey, right?
No, it wasn't until a few months ago where it started being like a reality. Like, oh my God, he's meeting all the requirements for graduation, and the kids have all come home at different times. It just never aligned. All their college schedules were different, so we just never had all four at the same time. And realizing that weekend was going to be the first time, so there was a lot of anticipatory excitement, but also anxiety of what if this clashes, right? What if this doesn't work? But trusting each other and really our children, they're amazing humans who all did a lot of work to get here. And all I can do is encourage other families to take the leap, to dive in. It is better. It can be better. It can be safe. It can be a thriving environment for everyone, which is really hard to see in the darkness of the chaos and the crisis. Reach out to the professionals available. Trust them. Trust the program you choose to send your child to, and then engage. All day long, engage.
What did you do to prepare him to come home? What did you do to prepare your family?
So we engaged a program called Wonder Plus, I think it's called. They are a wraparound service. So we, again, with our ed consultant, interviewed a couple of programs and chose them. So we had the support for several months of having a parent coach. He had his own coach, and then there were family meetings. So he met with his coach, I want to say initially 3 times a week. With it also comes like text access. So he was able to text him if he needed him. Our coach, we met with once a week, and also she was available for text. They helped us negotiate the family contract. They helped us sort of navigate some of the issues that came up fairly early on. The family contract will contemplate some things, but it's not going to account for the unknowns. And so it was really helpful to have this support structure through that transition. And that's also a program that doesn't have a timeline. It's sort of when you're done. And so we all found ourselves sort of done and not wanting our meetings anymore. And that's when we knew that we were done. So, and the other piece is within his first week home, he met his new therapist, his new psychiatrist, his new GP. So we had a lot of things lined up. So the first few weeks back home after 3 years, or almost 3 years, we're very busy just meeting and setting up the new normal.
Yeah, it's creating your own system at home.
Yeah.
And support.
Yeah, and I would say that that's probably the most critical. Don't take your foot off that pedal. That the breathing and kind of the sitting back and enjoying it doesn't happen upon your child's entrance into the home, it's a few months later, right? You want to make sure that you continue all the things that the child's been doing. So their physical activity, their academics, their mental health, their physical health. We had to go back to braces, right? So all the pieces that went on hold, where they didn't rate on the hierarchy of needs. Those had to be resumed. And of course, continuing the care. Continuance of care is probably the most important. It's how you're going to allow your child to feel safe in the transition and creating their own identity back in the family.
Well, it sounds like you really have done the proper steps that allows for him to be the most successful transitioning home, because that's a really tricky process for parents. There's a lot of anxiety, fears. You have to reshift the system, set up new boundaries, prepare things. And the child's usually anxious as well, scared of failure.
It's not without failure. It's not without challenges. And I think this is where we get to use our toolbox. When things aren't going smooth, how do we respond? Do we resort to old habits and old ways of conflict, or do we use our tools to navigate the way we're supposed to? I think most programs will have sort of trial periods, right? So you'll have visits, maybe a few hours, and eventually some overnights. And most programs will allow the family to test the waters and to experience short visits that grow in length and, I guess, kind of like intensity, right? You might have an overnight in-state and then eventually maybe some home visits. So utilize those, take those seriously. And I would say if your child has earned one, prioritize that. There are times where your child's next step, or kind of like what they're up to or have earned, could seem disruptive, and maybe it even is. But this is critical. You've put a lot into it. So prioritize the journey, even when it's not convenient, because if everybody's all in, you don't want to lose momentum or disrupt or cut it off because it's not convenient.
Yeah. You also don't want to make it a vacation, right? It needs to feel, as much as possible, it's not always 100% realistic, but as much as possible, what would it be like if they were home? What are the boundaries? So it's not just kind of free for all and do whatever you want. And, like there needs to be that structure. There needs to be, we're going to get up at this time. I still have to go to work. What are you going to do at home? Like, what is the structure? And like you said, a test run for when they really do come home.
Yeah. And the programs are very supportive of that. There's a lot of structure in place for those.
Absolutely.
So again, trust the system. And if the contract says that the child can't touch electronics, don't break the rules. Don't be part of the problem. Just go with it. Even if you don't think it's problematic for them to call their grandma. I mean, we took it so seriously. He wasn't allowed to touch electronics. So like if we did, a FaceTime with my mom, like I held the phone or put it down, and we followed the rules to the T, because you start murking up those lines and you're compromising a whole lot of investment.
Absolutely. What is one thing you wish you had known when you first started this journey?
How long and involved the process was. It wouldn't have changed anything that I did. I was, come hell or high water, I was going to do everything I could to help this child through and help our family get back to some semblance of safety. But I had no clue how long and involved it was going to be, and how long I was going to live this life of basically having half my body in another state. Like it feels like one of my limbs was across the state. So had I known how long this journey could be, perhaps my expectations would have been more aligned with a multi-year program, rather than having this expectation like, oh, you send your kid away and a few weeks later you see this new kid come home. That could not be farther from the truth. And we cannot become new people in a few weeks. So accepting accepting how dependent this process is on everybody's involvement and everybody's investment, and how much courage it's going to take.
I figured what you just shared aligns with what you'd want a family to know who's starting this process. But is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners who are considering residential treatment, especially a nature-based program?
It's really worth it. It's so scary and so frightening. And I think so many parents have a bright line that they are not willing to go past. Like, I'm not sending my kid away. That seems so past the point of failure. But when you're there and you cannot provide safety to your family, that's failure, right? That's crisis. And I encourage parents to just have the grit and the courage to do it and invest in their family. It's so worth it. It's probably the best gift I ever gave my family.
I love the vulnerability, the honesty, for your willingness to come on here and share your story, which takes a ton of courage to do. And I just love your passion. I've worked with a lot of families and a lot of amazing families. I wish a lot of families who came into any program came with your 110% I'm all in attitude. Sometimes we have to work to get families there, but man, it would just make the process so much, not necessarily easier, but more fulfilling for not only their child, but also for them. Thank you so much, Rivka, for coming on here and sharing your story with our listeners and giving our listeners hope that while this is a difficult place they're in and process, there is healing on the other side of it.
It really is. Thank you for having me.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Remember, every family's journey is unique and healing takes time. If you're considering next steps for your child, we hope this story has offered you clarity and hope. If you would like to find out more information about ThreePeaks Ascent, you can visit threepeakstreatment.com. Thank you again.